about sex in the hot tub and are too smart for our own goods, and we will always read fashion magazines at Walmart and then drive into the mountains. We'll go out and lay in the dirt, we'll snarl and howl, we'll tease each other's husbands, we'll extend blankets and babysitting coupons and ideas and hope each other never grow out of our skin. You're exactly right. Angry babies, that's it. We're the ABCDFs, Angry Baby Clan, destined eternal friends. Also, I think everyone on the temple grounds can see up your skirt. Shit. I adjust. Katie checks herself. We don't have the best track record with sitting demurely. We wait anxiously for a mutual friend to emerge from the building, husband in tow. Joanna's married. So crazy, right? The night before, we devoured hamburgers and prowled through at least 3 sex shops, all of us dressed in plastic beads and princess crowns. Towards midnight, Joanna started pacing in panic. After some laughter, we had asked her what was wrong. She needed body wax. Now. Walmart. We found a kit. The wax was supposed to smell like coconut. We brought her into the bathroom and warmed up the shower. She undressed and stepped in. My legs are going to be easy enough, but someone is going to have to do the rest. Katie looked at me straight away. We both know Crystal is going to be the one who ends up in there. And it was true. She needed her ladies that night.
Hello, my name is Stacey Dinetzosi. Jag är Stacey Dinetzosi Dinshia. That was myself introducing myself in Navajo, and that's who I am. So my first poem is called The Indian Beauty. I saw a picture, framed, in a dear friend's home, admired by all. She was called the Indian Beauty. She was clothed in soft, white, wrinkled buckskin fringe hanging off her breasts and sleeves. Snow cascaded around her, fading out the forest behind. Beads decorated her hair. She had one of those furtive stares, because that's what we look like. We lie half-clothed on buffalo skins in some state's gift shop or country store with hands that are brown soft, as if we don't work. As if our calloused lifestyles haven't marked us just yet, we are all thin as willows, legs limber as green wood in spring, like we don't eat or cook. In fact, we all have a native lover, or some John Smith. You see us twisted up in a loving embrace, vulnerable and sensuous, barely brown, almost white, white enough to be admired, white enough to be accepted. The flurries speckle out tradition, but when I look into the eyes of my mother, I don't see this. I see hands mangled by arthritis. Wrinkles web her tired face. My mother is creased with a tradition that is heavy to carry, so she has a broad back and sturdy arms, thick legs to carry on, because how else would we cross the threshold with our children on our backs to teach them not to be laden by the thickness of a blizzard cold past. Okay, that was my first poem. That's to my mother. And then the second poem is entitled Grandma. Grandma wears a brooch, a turquoise beetle that rests on her collar. It lulls when she falls asleep. Grandma's eyes are milky white. Her hair hangs over her face, cobwebs filled with silver strands of our history. Grandma's face is sun-spotted. Dark marks claiming a stake on her face, just like they did to her land. Grandma's finger is continually pricked, the bald finger riddled with needle holes. She still loves fried chicken. Grandma rests in the earth, leaving a world that never claimed her as its own. Backwards tradition left in the midst of unsettled dust. And this is my last poem, Putty-Faced Baby. A puffy snowsuit overwhelms my chubby frame. Thick snow blankets the back of the truck. I am too. My eyes peer past the chub of my cheeks. I share an innocent gaze with the camera. Putty-faced baby molded by the hands of circumstance. I know nothing about you, Mother. I didn't know that he had come in under the cloak of the night, dried eager hands on you like you were a towel, and wrung you until you were dry. I didn't know. You'd tell me on my 6th birthday, and I would watch as smoke smoldered, fueled by the melted stubs of candles, wax hardening on my cake.
Wow. Was that awesome or what?
Yeah.
So that was our first place winners, grad and undergrad, and again, some of our first place winners in that grad division were also second place winners in other categories. So, so right on to all you folks for leading the charge this year. Up next for us are our second and third place winners. We're going to hear from our grads first. That'll be Marianne Witterberg, Jessie Betts, and Angela Turnbow. Lori Lee, and then we'll have our undergrads, Alex Erickson, Leela Richardson, Isel Contreras, Ralph Frank, Millie Tullis, and Isaac Tim. And just want to remind you guys when you come up to say your name and the title of your work, and again, let people know if it's fiction or not fiction. Let them guess if it's a poem.
This is not as complicated as they're making it seem.
It's great.
Oh, whatever. Okay, my name is Marianne Witterberg, and the title of my piece is Burial Ground, and it is nonfiction. And just a couple of things before I start, because I'm kind of starting in the middle. So this piece is about cemeteries. Surprise, it's called Burial Ground. And so one thing you probably want to know is I have 13 siblings, and I'm the oldest, but at this time of this piece, or not when it was written, but at the time it is in this piece, I only had 11. So you'll hear 11, that's because I have 11 siblings. So, March 27th, 2006. The breeze plays to the top of a lone poplar. Leaves rustle, 1,000 tongues whispering a message I do not understand. I want to believe it's from my brother, Jacob, who lies in the polished blue casket trimmed in fleur-de-lis. I'd much rather hear from him than from the wrinkled man speaking words over a gaping hole in the ground. Jacob couldn't have known that the last thing he would say to me would be, "Algebra is stupid." I'd been trying to help Jacob with his math homework the morning before he died. "See," I'd said, "you have to do the same thing to both sides of the equation." "I don't care," he said. "You're never going to get anywhere in life if you don't learn this." "I don't need this stuff. Algebra is stupid." "Fine." I slammed his pencil down on the kitchen table, breaking the point and gouging the vinyl covering. I never talked to my brother again. The sun shouldn't be so bright today. The movies never portray it like this. Funerals happen under black umbrellas, rain muting the eulogy. The attendees shiver under their dark shelters, watch the rain drip down the canopies. Only a light breeze causes me to pull my arms close to my chest. Today is any other spring day. The breeze carries the smell of cut grass and freshly turned soil. People wander among headstones, leaving the first chrysanthemums of the season as Jacob's services conclude. My brother Jared and 4 of my cousins lower Jacob's casket into the ground. I cup my hands over my ears when they release the handles. Jared pulls a green canvas cover over the grave, and I solemn-hearted turns to chattering. I'm still listening to the tree, but I make out nothing over the conversations growing around me. "Isn't it wonderful that today could be so beautiful for Jacob?" a woman from our congregation says to Mom. Spring came the day Jacob died, 2 months early for Idaho. When I got home from school, I lingered on the back porch and stretched my arms out at my sides, face upturned toward the sun. I shuffled inside only when Mom told me to set the table for dinner. We didn't notice anything unusual until we called the family. Jacob was always one of the first to arrive. Like most teenage boys, dinner was his favorite time of the day. We waited 5 minutes, then 10. "Maybe we better look for him," Mom said. "He's probably outside somewhere." 11 pairs of legs rushed in 11 directions, but Jacob wasn't enjoying the early spring. He was lying in my parents' master bathroom below the shelf where my dad kept his guns. The sheriff said we found Jacob right after he dropped the rifle he was either taking down or putting away. But the search took hours. I think it's still going on. When the crowd surrounding my brother's grave thins to scatter clumps of hushed conversation, I stroll to the poplar and place my palm on its smooth trunk. I rest my forehead against the lowest branch and close my eyes. Beneath squirrels' chatter and crows' calls, the leaves hum. I imagine Jacob standing beside me, his hand on the opposite side of the trunk. And despite the conversing groups who think my brother's funeral is a social event, despite the inappropriate weather, despite the excavator waiting like a vulture just outside the cemetery, I think I hear Jacob's voice through the leaves. I was right, Marianne, it says. Algebra is stupid. Thanks.
Hi, I'm Jessie Betts, and I'm going to be reading from my fiction piece called Albatross. Sam sat on the back porch of the beach house he had rented for the weekend in Oceanside, waiting for Victoria and Tommy to arrive. Even this early in the morning, he could hear the city waking up behind him, which could work in his favor. He hoped he might be able to convince Victoria to move up there so he wouldn't have to commute to work anymore, and she loved city noise. It would be a hard sell. Victoria taught biology at San Diego University, and why should she have to commute to work? She had the higher paying job while Sam was only an adjunct at Maricosta College in Oceanside. It was more than the commute, though. He tired of San Diego, the ever-alive city. No moment when everything was still or at peace. The looming buildings, the throbbing skyline, jeweled windows glittering like facets of a schizophrenic diamond. It stifled. He finally understood what Victoria meant all those years ago when she said she didn't belong in Idaho Falls. He did not belong in San Diego. He would need more than that abstract flim-flam to convince Victoria, though. San Diego was her domain, and she looked good in it. Upright carriage, slim frame with sharp hip and collarbones, green coffee thermos perpetually in hand. A city girl through and through. He hoped that for the first time in their 19-year partnership, they would be able to compromise. Oceanside seemed a perfect compromise to him, the feel of San Diego on a much smaller scale. Though, even if Sam somehow succeeded in convincing her to move 45 minutes from her vibrant work and social life in San Diego, he still had no idea what he would say to their 16-year-old son, Tommy. One problem at a time. Victoria and Tommy finally arrived, and after greetings and breakfast, they walked down to the beach. Sam hoped his family would notice how this beach compared to San Diego beaches as cleaner, emptier, quieter, and that somehow that would be considered a good thing to them. But with Victoria armed with her high-tech bird-watching binoculars and Tommy with his surfboard, Sam didn't think it likely they would notice much else. Sure enough, Victoria immediately posted the binoculars a half-inch from her eyes and scanned the sky over the water. Tommy plunged through the surf and paddled to the breaks. He looked impressive on his board, centered, as the waves crashed around him. His tense muscles somehow held his body on a thin piece of fiberglass when a much greater power tried to rip them apart. Sam tried to decide what restaurant might impress Victoria and Tommy, but he couldn't get the noise of the ocean out of his ears. "Sammy," Victoria called, "look!" She thrust the binoculars into his hands and pointed into the sky. He put the binocular cord around his neck so he wouldn't drop them in the sand and pressed the rubber rims to his eyes. He tried to find what she wanted him to see, but he couldn't seem to coordinate the tiny speck in the sky with the magnified lenses. Before long, Victoria impatiently came up behind him, right hand on his shoulder, left hand guiding the binoculars. She stood a few inches taller than him, and he suddenly felt like a child under her touch. "See? Right there," she breathed into his hair. Finally he saw it, a bird, the color of soot, floating on air. "An albatross," Victoria sighed. Before he thought about it, Sam recited, "At length did cross an albatross, through the fog it came, as if it had been a Christian soul, we held it in God's name." He had recently read the rhyme of the Ancient Mariner and fell in love with the precise rhymes and rhythm. He knew exactly what to expect next. Victoria gazed at him with one cocked eyebrow as if she had never come across a creature such as him, or, on second thought, the same way she regarded her students' indecipherable assignments. Sam let the binoculars fall to rest around his neck. They were heavier than he expected them to be. Thank you.
Okay, is this working? Okay. My name's Angela Turnbow, and I'm going to be reading an excerpt from my nonfiction piece entitled Becoming a Savior. And just to give you a little background, this piece kind of gives a few pictures of the experiences I had while working as a CNA at a nursing home here in Logan. So, here it is. The honking car horns left a lingering tension in the air. An entire acre of land separated the nursing home from the busy street where the hospital resided. Yet the frantic rush of traffic permeated the area. The heavy weight of my tired limbs had not abated since waking up that morning, but George wanted a walk before dinner, so I consented. It was a habit for him to take a walk in the afternoon, and normally I enjoyed it. After a few turns inside the building, I stepped outside into the hot, noisy afternoon air with George and Derek, my CNA in training, in tow. George, a solid and severe-looking man, was the kind of person who would never hurt anyone. His warm, gentle manner endeared him to others. He transferred to the facility during midsummer to recuperate from a bad case of pneumonia. We walked down the slope of the Medicare entrance together, equipped with a walker and a gait belt fastened around his waist, but that still didn't prevent the fall from occurring. George tripped over his own feet, and there was no other logical option. He needed a clean fall. He teetered back and forth and must have wondered why I didn't reach out to him. I forced myself to take a step back and let it happen. He looked me in the eyes before I felt the rush of his body give way to gravity. Fear and confusion reflected in his face, and I knew the question he asked of me without any word spoken. Why won't you help me? And my response, I am. You just don't know it. There's a set procedure in place that every aide must learn to certify as a nurse's assistant. These procedures protect not only the resident but the aide. My training taught that if a resident was going to fall, the best option is to give the resident as clean a fall as possible. The fewer the barriers in the way, the less damaging the injuries. And my body was a barrier in George's fall. The possibility of him sustaining injuries from my prevention was too great, so the books told me to step back and protect myself. I could get hurt, and that would not help anyone. Not me, not the residents, and not my colleagues. We all rely on each other to help care for the residents on these two-person transfers. An aide can't help out if she suffers from a pulled muscle or a strained back. I remember Kelly. 2 weeks ago, she walked up to me as the afternoon shift began. I have a doctor's note for no lifting. Why? What happened? Hoping that concern sounded in my voice. But really, I was annoyed. Her doctor's note was going to make the shift long and tiring and not easy on anyone. Lorraine had a fall the other day while being transferred, and I hurt myself trying to prevent it, she explained. What went wrong with the transfer? I continued. Her legs gave out, and it caught us off guard. We ended up sliding her to the ground. But I won't allow a resident to fall on my watch, so I held on to her and hurt my back in the process, she said. Her idea of help was so different than mine. We worked at the same nursing facility together for 3 years, and yet her actions suggested she did not believe in the procedures. A few days after our conversation, Kelly came into work to notify the staff of her leave of absence. Her doctor found extensive damage in her back, and she needed time to recover from the injury. She stepped forward to help Lorraine, and yet in the end, it cost her. My reaction to a fall was automatic. It made sense to follow textbook training. No harm done to myself. But as I stood before George in his post-fall state, I felt the need for a leave of absence as well. We congregated around the nurse's station, reflecting on the last busy hour. The aides, wanting to know George's prognosis, pestered the nurse with questions. One turned to me and asked how I was feeling. Shock registered on my face. Not once did it occur to me that someone would be thinking of me when someone else had fallen. No one ever asked such a question before the previous accidents at work. The silence settled in around the aides as they waited for my response. Thank you.
My name is Lori Lee, and this is poetry, but it's sprinkled with fiction and nonfiction. The first one is called Enough Already, and since it's the end of the semester, I'll let some of you come relate. I swear, I am no more tired than an angel who has danced forever in her stocking feet. And I am no more tired than a child carried by his father from the car, shoes, socks, carefully removed, his body curling completely to his dreams. And I am no more tired than any woman after days of chasing minutes and years, never to catch them, but somehow to hold them in those bags on her hips. And I am no more tired than life, with all its lazy dogs flocked in the shade, panting out their exhaustion, jowls flagging. The next one is called Prayers. In the meat aisle, she raises her voice and says, "Jesus, I need a special on pork chops." She just wants help, a sign that someone listens. Like taxes, men and their sex, impatient mothers, some things just are. She is. With pomegranate lipstick, lips slick with red number 9, she is us. There is no such thing as normal people. Pray, brothers, sisters, daughters, parents. Pray for the longevity of the AstroTurf. Pray for the wicked on fire in their own self-loathing. Pray for moisture. Pray for pomegranate red number 9. Pray for love and money. Pray for pork chops. Pray like your life depends on it. And the last one is called Foreign Music, or More Than One Way to Say a Thing. And this comes from a few years ago. I was at a writing residency back in Vermont, and those that were attendees at the residency location were from all over the world. So there were artists and writers, and we only saw each other at meal times because during the rest of the time we were in our studios either writing or working on whatever art we were doing, and then we'd get together at meals. And so this is about an exchange that went on. And forgive my attempt to capture the accent. He looks over us and in broken English says, "You three always together, a trio, you know, 3 instruments, music. A quartet is better." And he sits at our table. The next day at lunch, he admits he does not play an instrument. He says he will conduct. Uneasy, with his quick rise to power, I mumble, "In your dreams." "You know, Bach," he says on day 3, then something about how the genius could take liberties. A particular piece hums from his lips, and I nod yes, though I have no idea. He nods. We eat in silence. On day 4, he tells me he likes my watch, and I thank him, place my arm in my lap. "You know why I no tell you I like you," he says. "Because if I do, you hide just like you now hide your watch." He smiles with the wind of a laugh, his eyes like stage fright. Or maybe that was me, and his eyes were conducting.
All right, my name's Alex Erickson. I'll be reading from my fiction piece called The High One. The bush plane slid to a stop on the crusty late November snow near a freezing lake in the western part of the Alaska Range. Carl stepped down in his lime green parka and pulled his pack out. Robert handed his own pack to Carl and stepped down after. The pilot cut the engine and opened the cockpit window. "Last chance," he said. "You guys sure about this?" "Of course we're sure," Carl said. "You'll be seeing us at the West Rib within a week." The pilot looked at Robert, who nodded with forced confidence. He had been backpacking before, had spent 10 days in the Bob Marshall Wilderness last summer, and 4 days in the Wind Rivers the January before it, but had nowhere near the experience Carl had. Not with an undertaking like this. Small amounts of daylight, the likelihood of extreme cold. This was new. The pilot started the engine, gave a quick salute, brought the plane around, throttled up, took off, and banked toward the coming sun. After checking that their snowshoes and other gear were secured to their packs, they pulled the straps up over their shoulders. "So," Carl grinned through his red beard and pulled his watch cap down over his ears. "You sure about this?" Past midday, Carl sat on a rock, planted his ice axe in the old snow like a flag, and pulled out the map. Robert remained on his feet a few yards away, bent at the waist and sucking in breaths. He straightened and gulped from his canteen. They had been climbing for the better part of 3 hours along the ridge to the pass, but not before 2 more hours of negotiating woods and hills of the valley they landed in. "It's still 45 minutes to still 40 miles to Talkeetna as the crow flies," Carl said, and marked an X on the map before he folded it and stuffed it back into a side pocket on his pack. "And then you can call that dear Karen of yours." Robert forced a single laugh. "I guess so. She'd probably kill me if I didn't." "What's that now? You aren't going to be just dying to call your old lady? You two, Carl began adjusting the crampon on his right boot. "You two doing all right?" "Yeah," Robert said, suddenly feeling the spotlight. He sat down on a nearby rock to appear comfortable. "Same old, same old." "I don't know how you can handle it, man." Carl shook his head. "Not Karen. I don't really know her. I mean, having a girlfriend in general." Robert laughed genuinely this time. "Not so sure I do handle it." Then I'll jump ahead to later in the story here. The next morning, he woke hours before the sun, breathing out smoke with his face numb and his body aching. He opened the door to the tent and shook his head. Of course. Fresh snow had fallen in the night. Robert pressed his hand through it till he felt the ground, about 6 inches. Great. He sat for a while and then pulled on his parka, pants, and boots and stepped outside. He scanned his campsite with the flashlight, but when he thought about it, he didn't know why. It's not like he would have noticed any differences, what the state he was in when he settled here. He did see, however, a small bump where the fire had been. He untied one end of the rope he had run over branches of 2 trees to hang his pack and lowered the pack to the ground. He brushed off the snow and rummaged inside for some food. He trudged about 50 yards until the trees opened up to a view of a long valley extending north and south. He turned off the flashlight and pulled a piece of jerky from his pocket and bit off a chunk. As he chewed, he wondered at the majesty of what he saw. The stars and moon lit mounds and troughs, peppered with patches of frosted cones and spindles, all shapes rudimentary. Despite the new hell it brought with it, the snow had an equalizing effect on the world, a death mask hiding from him all the scars and truths of the land. And through the clear sky, beyond the lower mountains across the valley, the summit of Denali ever faintly present. That's what I got.
Hello, my name's Leela Richardson, and I'm reading from a piece called Floating and Falling. It's a nonfiction piece about learning to swim, and it kind of jumps between my experiences when I was younger and when I'm older. So follow along with me. There are a couple different scenes in what I'm reading. The monster in the closet had never scared me like the one underwater. I'd been 6, and although I hadn't known it yet, he'd been lurking in a backyard pool. While I'd sat on a floating chair, he'd been the green reflected on the floor under my inflated plastic. His ragged breaths were waves rocking my throne back and forth like a soothing cradle. I laughed and joked with my friends, unaware of his lurking. Light played over the water, reflecting shifting shapes and shadows, beautiful against the blue surface. It was just a joke that landed me in those teeth the first time. A friend tipped the chair, not realizing that it had crept too far in the deep end for me to stand on the bottom, not knowing that since I hadn't yet learned to swim, I would rest on the bottom either way. Blue stretched out before my eyes, my earth and my sky. There was no monster in the water. The monster was the water. That's the first time the water had deafened me to the screaming, but it hadn't been mine. My sister and my mother had yelled, "Leela can't swim!" I'd been scooped out of the water before my skin would be wrinkled by the chlorinate saliva. He hadn't taken me then, but he'd gotten a taste. And forever after, I was like Hook with his crocodile. I knew out there in the water something craved me. "Leels?" His baritone voice broke through the panic like fog around me. My eyes found the green anchor again, and it was right across from me. It was all right. It was all right. I didn't need to hold on to him like I would the wall. He would come after me if I sank. My arm stroked over my head more easily this time and then hit smooth tile. "Don't run into the wall," he chuckled. From out of my lips crept a laugh I hadn't realized was there, and my breathing evened out around the comforting sound. Whoops. I let my feet catch up to me so they were moving like a frog beneath me, just how he'd explained. I bobbed in the water and my arms circled around like stirring two potions, one that had to turn clockwise and one that just as certainly must be counterclockwise. That was good. How do you feel? I feel good. My head bobbed up and down. Let's try floating. My body doesn't float. My body sinks. He eyed my leopard-suited self and laughed. I think your body will float just fine. But if it will make you feel better, you can float on my hand. Here, lean back. He came up behind me and took my shoulders, guiding them back against his chest while moving out of the way, so I never touched more than his palm and the small of my back. It was a pseudo-trust fall, and he was stepping out of the way, letting my back and shoulders, head, and even ears sink into the water. I walked with my big sisters through our neighbor's fence and into their backyard. "What's this lady's name?" I asked in a quick whisper, gripping my princess towel around my waist. "Nayland?" "Newland," Catherine corrected. The pool was a coliseum of water, sticking up from the ground with the foe that had nearly destroyed me last time waiting inside. As I descended into the arena and negotiating each step down the ladder with care, I realized that my foe was shorter this time. The water didn't even reach my shoulders. I was taller than him. I smiled. The first thing we had learned at our neighborhood swim lesson was to float. I watched everyone lean into the water, magically floating over the top like feathers, and did a simple calculation. If I lay down, I would be once again shorter than my opponent. "Here, let me help you," the new labor said, standing at my side and putting her pudgy hand against my back. She pushed me back with the other, like a baptism, which would scare me 2 years later. "Stay straight," she encouraged, and I was astonished when my body skimmed the surface of the water, resting all the weight my father now called too heavy for shoulder rides. "You're doing great." But then she moved her hand, and I wasn't. I lifted my head startled, and my body sank into the water like the enchantment had broken. Her hand caught my lower back and pushed it up again. "Stay straight." "You moved your hand," I informed her, wondering why she hadn't realized the reason for my fall was her and not me. "It's all right, your body is mostly made of water and fat, so you'll float." I wanted to make a joke to my sister. Did she just say that I'm fat? But then she moved her hand again. My head began to rise from the water, but her words cut me off. "You're all right, I've got my hand under you, it's just not touching you." I rested my head back against my waterbed. The sun was rising in the sky, resting in my eyes. I closed them, letting the heat work against my eyelids and dry my face, trying to relax. It seemed that several minutes passed before I opened my eyes again. Neighbor Newland was gone. My head jolted up as my pivot plummeted down. Like a V, I plunged into the water, stumbling to get my feet under me. My head fell below the surface for just a moment, tasting a hint of chlorine, and then I was on my feet again, affronted by a strange, unpleasant flooding in my nose. The water must have gotten in a few good punches, one to my gut, the other to my nostril. A tear mingled with cool water in my eye. It hurt. I climbed out of the pool, calling a draw, and I never returned. I would have made a very bad Roman.
We're looking for Nacelle Contreras. Pardon, it seemed like it was ready for you, but then it was your turn.
There was somebody before me. Okay. Hi, I'm Nacelle. I'm gonna read poetry, and just a little background. The one I'm gonna read is about Jack Kerouac's On the Road. So for those of you that aren't familiar with it, here is. Wait, can you guys hear me?
Yeah.
Yeah. Here's a little quote from the book that says, "The only people for me are the mad ones, the ones who are mad to live, mad to talk, mad to be saved, desirous of everything at the same time, the ones who never yawn or say a commonplace thing, but burn, burn, burn like fabulous yellow Roman candles exploding like spiders across the stars." So yeah, if that doesn't win you over, we can't be friends. So my poem is called Roman Candle. I laugh at myself when I think of meeting Jack. He'd be sitting in front of his typing machine with a cigarette tucked lazily between his lips as he writes about motel rooms and pool halls and jail cells. I imagine him furiously pounding the keys while his mind speeds through Denver. God damn it, what a sight. Like watching a madman take out a splinter of glass from his palm. Jack would take a break and we'd talk for hours while Roy Eldridge blares downstairs. And he'd find me intriguing enough to make me a character in his legendary scroll. I place the empty bottle by the crib and I just laugh until I wake the baby upstairs. His cries break my reverie and I am left in shambles, crying, laughing. So that's one. And then the second one I wrote for my grandma, who passed away a couple years ago on a Tuesday night. So it's called Tuesday. Tuesday morning, I'm walking through a public trail with big-tooth maples everywhere and a leaf falls. Her dark skin looks pretty in the fall, Abuelita would say. Her yellow dress flowing in the autumn breeze. But everything is dying. It doesn't matter. Brown looks good with the reds and oranges. One sentence from her and I'd feel beautiful. More leaves fall like confetti at my feet. Winter is coming. All year I wait for fall, the landscape to ignite in flames of burnt orange and vermilion. Veiny leaves like my abuelita's papery hand rustle with autumn dew. It's foggy mornings like today that I wait for, the veil with crisp droplets that leave my cheeks red. I do not care for harvest. I do not care for cinnamon and candles. No, what worries me is winter. How bitter the cold is, exposing the maple trail's skeleton. A vicious wind sweeps the brown trees bare and leaves. Nothing looks beautiful anymore, for everything dies on winter Tuesdays.
Hi, my name is Laurel Frank, and I'm going to be reading my fiction piece. I can get this on. Weirdest Things Found in Stiffs. The sharp scent of disinfectant mostly overwhelmed the sickly undertone in the room as Eli Park adjusted the bright white lights overhead. He spread a surgical drape over the inert face of the young woman lying unclothed on the cold metal table, her body arched slightly over the block propped under the small of her back. Eli crossed to one of the black cabinets that lined the sterile white walls and withdrew several silvery instruments on a tray, including a scalpel, which he lifted in one of his turquoise-gloved hands. Face scrunched in concentration behind his rectangle-framed glasses, he made the first incision. The scalpel slid easily through flesh as Eli carefully sliced from each shoulder in a V to the bottom of the breastbone. From the tip of the V, he drew another line straight down the center of the soft abdomen, rounding the navel and ending at the pubic bone, splitting the skin and tissue in a shallow canyon along the incision. "Where's Thad?" Eli asked, glancing up at Dr. Ramiro Flores, who stood on the other side of the room. Before Ramira could answer, the cream-colored swinging door squeaked open as Dr. Thad Shipper entered, as though summoned by mention of his name. He crossed the room, half skipping, his footsteps tapping on the off-white linoleum floor. Thad was only a few years older than Eli, perhaps 34 or 35. He was almost as tall as Eli, though not quite as lanky. His blonde, slick-combed hair, currently covered with a surgical cap, and symmetrical, aristocratic features hinted at erudite sophistication. When Eli first met him, however, it had taken about 5 minutes before the young doctor's behavior thoroughly disproved any such assumptions. "I got it," Thad said, pulling up his surgical mask. He took the scalpel in his own gloved hand and proceeded to make ninja sword sound effects with his mouth as he hacked through the connective tissue between the chest flap and the ribs, peeling the V up to expose the sternum, front ribs, and sinewy neck meat. "Having fun?" Eli said. "Yep." More sound effects, unpleasant squishing ones, ensued as Thad gripped the edge of the flesh firmly at the belly, stretching it upward. As he slit the remaining tissue to expose the organs, the swollen intestine bulged out of the incision. "Quit it, you're distracting," said Ramira, raising one thin black eyebrow. She stood across the room over a similar setup, a second fully gutted body splayed before her on a second metal table. "Quit what, Remy?" Thad said, looking up at her briefly with an innocent expression, before turning back to the body and separating the rest of the skin, fat, and muscle from the rib cage inside with more ninja sword sound effects, then flapping the breast and attached flap to either side so that the abdominal cavity and rib cage lay completely exposed. "Seriously, how old are you?" Ramira said, shaking her head, her voice stern, but her pretty dark eyes strained at the corners from resisting the urge to laugh. Eli looked away from her and instinctively took a half step away from Thad as he gestured vaguely with the scalpel. "Irrelevant," said Thad, setting the blade back on the tray. He extended his hand expectantly toward Eli. "Loppers." Eli sighed and handed Thad the heavy shears. There was no need for Thad to make his own sound effects as he clipped through the rib cage with several loud clacks. The coiled bowels wobbled like misshapen jello with the motion of each sharp snap. After helping Thad remove the chest plate, Eli moved the white plastic trays from the counter onto the edge of the table within Thad's reach. Thad flippantly but precisely cut free the heart, then the left lung, then the right. Before long, the two of them had removed most of the upper innards from the cavity, and Thad was reaching from inside the empty chest to free the neck organs and tongue. "I'm going to go out on a limb here," said Eli as Thad squinted and probed with the scalpel, "and say that the cause of death had something to do with that, whatever that is that's obstructing the trachea," Thad finished. At length he removed the object. He closed his eyes in a solemn expression. "Eli, the list." Eli obediently stood and crossed the room, pulling off his plastic gloves as he neared a simple wooden desk, the surface of which was hidden by stacks of paperwork. "Remy, come here," Thad said. Ramira sighed and complied, bending over the object in question. "What is that a dreidel?" Thad laughed, and Eli grinned as he turned to the poster board pinned to the wall above the desk, the heading of which read, "Weirdest Things Found in Stiffs," in Thad's careless, all capitals hand. Uncapping a black Sharpie, Eli neatly printed dreidel under mechanical pencil, partially inflated helium balloon, and in Thad's hand, MED, medieval lance head. Was she trying to eat it? Ramira wondered aloud. "Somebody had too much fun at Kwanzaa," Thad said, picking up the clay spinning top and giving it a twirl on the tray. Ramira stared at him. "You mean Hanukkah?" "Thank you."
That was next, right?
Yep.
Okay. Okay. My name's Millie Tullis, and I got 3rd place for undergraduate nonfiction. The title of my essay is Flesh Memories. Basically, all that's literally happening is I'm walking through a cemetery. So we're going to just start there. I don't know this grave. I hold no personal claim on it. I just stopped. Now I am stooping before it, close enough I could reach out and touch it. As the thought occurs to me, I do it, but I sense that I am an intruder for the first time when the solid, rough rock hits my fingers' pads. I drop my hand ashamed, and use both hands to clutch my notebook again instead. Babies of Myrtle and John Young, 1919. The words are small, resting in careful print on a small, careful headstone. It was on the left side of the road when I had been walking, and the word babies had stopped me.
The babies might have grown into 2 little girls who held hands and walked into the first day of kindergarten together. They might have been best friends, reading books aloud to each other at night in matching twin-sized beds set parallel in a brightly painted bedroom like my sister and me. They might have had teenage boys who wanted to hold them, shivering in the back of parents' borrowed cars, boys who kissed their cheeks and faces whispering "I love you" through heavy breaths. They might have been mothers or doctors or lawyers or writers. The stone yields nothing else to me, but I stare. Maybe to every parent, your child is always your baby too. Maybe to your heart, a middle-aged, balding son can't ever be fully separated from the pale, gently breathing bundle that a nurse placed in the natural nook of your arm at that first introduction. His face came from something that was pink and shiny and new and bright. It'll always be holding in it that which you see as new and bright, a baby's life, potential, start. Perhaps it'll always seem to be the baby that needed you, and you'll never escape from that striking terror that you need him now too. My mother and brother call my 2 younger sisters and me the babies. They have since my youngest sister was born, all 3 of us only 4 years apart. I'm 18 years old today. They'll call me one of the babies until the day I die. My heels are thick, but they sunk into the grassy earth before the grave when I first crouched. It hadn't rained that day. October still left a little dampness in the grass and dirt, and it was soft. My heels punctured it too quickly. I wondered how many tears had nourished the small piece of earth below me, the dirt, the grave I was now sinking into, and how many other tears for this grave had been washed away somewhere else. Perhaps there had been a mother, wiping her wetted face quickly, on the arm of her sleeve, stretching it out past her thin wrist, her knees bending together and meeting for her elbows to sink into, her back arched. She sat on the lid of a bathroom toilet with the fan going to cover up the trembling, crying sounds she couldn't seem to stop. Perhaps just outside was the bedroom where the father had held his face in large hands and wept like a child, sitting on the edge of a sinking bed in a buttoned white shirt and dark tie, waiting for his wife to finish getting ready. Only after the tears had been stuffed away could they slip on their dry masks again, hiding the scars crying left on their cheeks, to go dancing with a neighbor couple. Perhaps they had both cried where my shoes sank now, for the babies sleeping beneath my feet. There aren't any tears now. I'm alone before the stone. All of the children, grandchildren, and great-grandchildren, all of the John and Myrtle Youngs probably nod at papers holding family birth and death certificates dry-eyed. Stacks of my own family's souls sit in my parents' house. They sit in the same way in the houses of my aunts and uncles. They lie in binders and books as projects. The aunts and uncles had made the books themselves. The pages are cracked open to find a picture, a birthday, or a name for a school assignment. Then their lives are closed again. Like the loose-leaf papers, they are bound together by rings and put in a stack in a corner. The ghosts' kisses and accomplishments and babies sink lower and deeper under the stacks as years pass. The papers are brittle and dry. I stand and begin to walk again. My legs and body feel lighter. The grave leaves me feeling afraid or guilty. I had no right to be sad for the dead babies. What do I know of dying, or last breaths taken, or breaths that were never taken at all? I don't even know the broken mother. I've never bled like her, or cried from losing flesh I grew. Sweat. I've never sweated, never passed a starting sweetness, a sticky shine, a young dew, and all my bones are whole.
Can you hear me? I'm only going to be reading one of the 3 poems I wrote for the contest. This is kind of the poem that Logan wrote. I wrote this in Michael Souter's class. Well, actually, no, I wrote it at the Utah League of Writers. We were having our workshop, our weekly workshop, and I wanted to write a poem with the word positraction in it, because I thought it was really, really cool. And so I wrote this poem. And I took it through my writers group, and then I took it through Michael Sauter's class, and basically, on the surface, it's a poem about a boy pursuing a girl. But deeper down, it's about a boy dealing with a mother with bipolar disorder, and about how fast the manic highs could go to catatonic depressions, and how you feel responsible for that, even though there is nothing really you can do about it. This is The Girl from Las Vegas Drives Away. You peel out full posi traction, roaring away, a white teardrop Chevy to lozenge at the vanishing point. You leave me behind to swallow the words I meant to say. You're a dead ringer for my mother, for her distance. Mother, I love you, don't go away. She went deep into her head. You pass between Joshua trees, a blur. I have nothing left but illusions. How I hate you. Me struck dumb in the sun, naked under the phosphorescent bulb. The roar of your engine, a fading, ringing buzz.
That was great. It was all great. It was awesome. What a lot of stuff we've just gone through. It's like a whole compendium of life tonight, right? And I think that's what's so amazing to me every year. And especially this year, the range of things that everyone's writing about. I've had several of the judges come to me and say, the things that people were trying this year were so much more complicated, so much more sophisticated than they've ever seen before. And I think that's true. I think our writers in our little Logan writing community just keep getting better, just keep getting sharper, just keep getting deeper. And I'm really glad to be a part of it. I'm glad you guys are a part of it too. I want to just, for one quick moment, just to point out that what we've been enjoying on the screen here ever so dimly is the artwork